And through experiencing the 12 steps, I had that spiritual experience. The definition of a spiritual experience simply means a psychic change, meaning I no longer think today how I thought last year or 6 years ago when I walked into sobriety. And what I know to be certain is that I suffer from the disease called alcoholism, not alcoholism. And I cannot stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. I know my story. It's not hard for me to think about it. And I told you, this was the last thing I tried that was the first thing that worked. If I could think of a different way to try or move or rearrange this to get a different result, I would have.
Hello and welcome to The Sober Social, a podcast from the Hoffa Foundation and a show about how you can live your best life sober. I'm your host, Adam Stoltz, a video producer here to help tell the stories that can change lives. I'm joined today by my co-hosts for this adventure and the man you should reach out to if you need help or have feedback about this show, co-founder of the Hoffa Foundation, Mr. Tom Herb. Tom, say hello and tell all of our listeners how they can get a hold of you and the Hoffa Foundation if they need support or would like to start a conversation.
Hey, Adam. Thank you. Tom Herb here, co-founder of the Hoffa Foundation. Been around now for almost 2 years. And the way in which you all can get in touch with us, certainly head out to our website, hoffafoundation.org. In addition, we've got our helpline, which is 866-577-9810. And really looking forward to this episode today with Mr. Brandon Novak.
Right on. Thanks for that, Tom. And if you like what you see in here today, please be sure to subscribe, like, share with loved ones and elected officials in your area. Leave a 5-star rating. You can also donate to Hoffa's cause right at their homepage at hoffafoundation.org. And they can't thank you enough in advance for your support. Our guest today, he was a professional skateboarder at age 15. At age 16, he was traveling the world with Tony Hawk. He was the first skateboarder to ever be sponsored by Gatorade. He's been in commercials with Michael Jordan. He was in the Jackass movies that broke box office records, as well as the hit TV show Viva La Bam. He's the author of a New York Times top 10 seller recovery autobiography titled Dream Seller. He has also published a new book titled The Streets of Baltimore, but today says he's first and foremost a person in long-term sobriety and a certified intervention professional. Please help us welcome to the show, founder of Novak's House, Brandon Novak. Brandon, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm truly grateful to be here, and it's a long time overdue, to say the least.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to have you. And let's just start out real quick for those that may not know. What is Novak's House?
You know, Novak's House is a place where the misfits fit, right? The undesirables of the world at one point in time hopefully come to Novak's House and they be transformed into a productive member of society, a productive tax-paying member of society. It's a sober living house. It's a 12-step based sober living house where we believe in the notion that everybody deserves a chance. And I've embarked on this new mission that I refuse to let money be a deterrent as to the reason why someone can't accept our help. So we can and will help anybody that is in need or looking for it. They just have to. There has to be 2 requirements met, or 3. There have to be 3 requirements met. There has to be a bed available. They have to be a male because I only have men's housing, and they have to be willing to do what it takes to stay sober and live in our sober living houses.
Good stuff. Well, let me ask you one more thing, and then I'll let Tom ask you some questions. You've told it a million times, so you don't have to go through in great detail. But for those that may not know, can you give us a quick overview of your story about how you got to where you are today?
Sure, man. I like to say today I got to where I'm at because I simply did process of elimination, but backwards. I tried everything known to man to fix my never-ending problem, if you will, and ultimately the last thing I tried, which was the first thing that worked for me, and I'm married to my narrative because it's mine and it worked for me, was a 12-step based program called Alcoholics Anonymous. But prior to ending up there, I was a goal. I had goals. I was a kid who had goals. I had dreams. I had ambitions. I had aspirations. My mother was a nuclear physicist. My brother is an attorney in the White House. My father died as a direct result of his disease of addiction. Um, Me, on the other hand, I'm a former professional skateboarder, uh, riding for Pal Peralta, touring the world with Tony Hawk, designing my prototype shape that would have potentially turned into my pro model. Um, Sponsored by Gatorade, tripped and fell into those movies, Jackass, the TV shows Viva La Bam. A few steps further down that road, I become a New York Times selling author who written an autobiography addiction memoir. Um, but despite doing those things in life that people would accredit to success, happiness, potentially even dream of doing, the reality of what my life really looked like was May 25th, 2015. I was divinely inconvenienced in just such a manner that the God of my understanding showed up and created just a big enough gap between me and the last time I ingested a drink or a drug that allowed me to have that moment of clarity to see what my life really looked like was. And I was no longer accepting of it. And what it looked like was I was a 38-year-old homeless heroin addict who resided on the corner of Eastern Avenue and Patterson Park in Baltimore City, Highlandtown to be exact. Since you guys are Maryland based, a lot of people know what I'm talking about. And I would prostitute my body just to secure enough finances to acquire another bag of heroin. I was about to walk into my 13th inpatient treatment center. I'd lost count of outpatients and detoxes. My mother had bought me a plot. People had taken life insurance policies out on me. May 24th, 2015, I just woke up from being on life support for 7 days at Mercy Hospital, the very same hospital my mother's on the board of in Baltimore City. Um, I had been medevac to 4 different hospitals in 4 different states for 4 different overdoses. My mother had sold 3 homes to financially pay for me to go to 2 different treatment centers. 38 years old, I'm a homeless heroin addict roaming the streets of Baltimore, wanting to kill myself on a daily basis. I just didn't want to hurt myself in the process. It was terrible suicide because I kept waking up. And I found myself in a position where I was so low the curb looked like a skyscraper. And again, despite being a successful individual on the exterior and on paper, the reality of what my life really looked like is that everything I owned consisted of 8 scarves, 2 jackets, 3 socks, 1 stick of deodorant. It fit into my bag that doubled as a pillow, a needle, a spoon, and a restraining order. And finally, May 25th, 2015, I found myself in a position where the pain became unbearable. Unmanageable is a Monday morning for a fellow like me, but unbearable is what it takes in order for whatever it is to create enough willingness to change in my life. And I was blessed with the ability to walk through the doors of treatment center number 13. And I was so broken and so beaten that for the first time I was willing to do anything they suggested. And I could no longer deny the severity of the disease for which I had been diagnosed with, right? Like for 24 years, I continued to rearrange the furniture on the Titanic, but my ship always sank without fail. And I knew, right? And I realized the common denominator in my problems were me. And if I just got out of my way, maybe I stood a chance. And the pain became so great, I went into treatment, and I was open-minded just long enough to become willing to follow any suggestion that they gave me. And for the first time in my life, I successfully completed a 90-day treatment center program. And from that program, I went to a sober living house where I lived for 1 year. 9 months into that process of sobriety, my mother, the one that bought me the plot, that took life insurance policies out on me, that served me with a restraining order, that, she called me and she said, "Brandon, I hate when you come to visit." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I get so sad when you leave." And on my second year anniversary, I was blessed with the ability to fly to Paris to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and pick up my 2-year medallion. On my third year anniversary, I bought a home. On my fourth year anniversary, I went to Amsterdam to a 12-step Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and picked up my 4-year medallion. And on my fifth year anniversary of sobriety, I vowed that when I found myself in a position where I was financially capable of recreating the sober living house that I lived in for my first year of sobriety, that did for me what no other place was really capable of doing, I was going to recreate that. Because they told me in treatment in the beginning, if I stick to my basics, God willing, I'll never have to go back to the basics. And I heard what they said, when if you can't keep this thing without giving it away. and the stakes were very high for an alcoholic like me, because you know, I wasn't the alcoholic that was scared of returning back to drinking and dying, right? To drink is to die, to drug is to die. I get that, but I was the kind of addict that like welcomed death because it would at least put me out of my misery. What scared me to death was like going out drinking and drugging but not dying, having to wake up every day doing things against my will to achieve enough money to buy another bag of heroin or a bottle of wine, and that scared me into reality. And on my 5th year anniversary, literally to the date, I opened up one bed, a men's sober living house in Wilmington, Delaware, called Novak's House. That house was a 11-bed house, and today we now have 3 Novak's houses in Wilmington, Delaware, with 42 beds. Um, you know, and God willing, May 25th, 2022, I'll celebrate 7 years of continuous sobriety. You know, so that's kind of my story in a real quick nutshell.
So Brandon, you know, man, I've heard your stories now multiple times, and I love you, man. First and foremost, like, you being on the show means the world to our foundation and all the people that we're connected to. So glad that you and I met each other at John Chinholzer's event last year in May at that golf outing. From then till now, just building our relationship. And like you said, man, both out of the Maryland area. And every time I hear your story, I learn something new every single time. And every time I hear your story, I do try to figure out, like you said, the common denominators in the story. And the one thing that you've said time and time again, which I'm a big believer in, many say it in the recovery community, that, you know, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's a human connection. And, you know, I wonder, like, just for you specifically on your journey, you know, to ensure that you've got that connection established every single day, what do you do?
Um, I don't do much. It's really, the sobriety is kind of one big oxymoron. It makes no sense. But what I've learned is that my program works when I don't work it, right? Because my first thought is like, I don't like, I'm a busy man. I have businesses, I have employees. I'm an interventionist. I'm a motivational speaker. I'm a professional skateboarder. I work in the drug and alcohol treatment field. I help people get in treatment. The last thing I feel like doing tonight is going to an AA meeting, right? So what I do is I have this heightened sense of awareness. Ignorance is no longer bliss. I was beaten so bad that I turned it into my purpose, and I really dove into what they were telling me. And what that meant is I experienced the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and through experiencing the 12 steps, I had that spiritual experience. The definition of a spiritual experience simply means a psychic change, meaning I no longer think today how I thought last year or 6 years ago when I walked into sobriety. And what I know to be certain is that I suffer from the disease called alcoholism, not alcoholism. And I cannot stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. I know my story. It's not hard for me to think about it. And I told you, this was the last thing I tried that was the first thing that worked. If I could think of a different way to try or move or rearrange this to get a different result, I would have. Believe it or not, I did not stumble into Alcoholics Anonymous, a happy-go-willing participant of a 12-step program in search of a spiritual fucking experience. That's not what I was inside. That wasn't my deal. But I was broken so bad that when I came in, I knew that, like, I can't do this on my own. And if I could have, I already would have years ago. And then I bought into the concept of what you guys do to stay sober on a daily basis. And I had that spiritual experience. And now through the God of my understanding and the really tight program that I work today, at this very moment, it's impossible for me to go out and pick up a drink or a bag of heroin at this moment. Let me stop doing what I'm doing on a daily basis, and I'll believe that voice inside of my head that talks to me in my own voice, that tells me, you know, you've been sober 7 years. You go to bed by 10 p.m. You're a productive tax-paying member of society. You don't want heroin or cocaine, but you could probably have a glass of wine. and I'll start believing that as time goes on, and it will snowball effect into the, something to where I believe the lie and I go have that one. And I know that I've seen me do it. So I keep it really simple, man. I wake up in the morning, I get on my knees. I ask God to walk with me through the day. I thank him for everything he's given me, everything he's taken from me, and everything he has in store for me. And I ask how I can continue to help his brothers, his children, my brothers and sisters, walk in the spirit of his sunlight and just try to help the next person, and remain accountable for my actions. Like I have this wealth of knowledge inside of my brain that I couldn't turn it off if I wanted, unless enough time lapsed to where I stopped talking to you, I stopped answering the phone, I stopped going to meetings, I stopped sponsoring people, I stopped calling my sponsor, and then I'll believe that lie that's won many times.
Well, and Brandon, I've heard you say before in some of the other interviews that at certain parts of your life, if you had only had an open heart and an open mind, things could have been different. To those out there right now that really need to hear that message, how important is having an open heart and an open mind and not knowing everything to accepting help and getting going in the right direction?
Dude, it's the only thing that allowed me to end up in the position where I'm at today. I don't believe anybody in a 12-step program or someone suffering with the disease of alcoholism and or addiction got here because we took the short bus to school. I don't think that's the case. I know for certain for myself and everyone else that I surround myself with, we ended up here because we were too smart for our own good. And continuously, I would sit in meetings, I would sit in treatment centers, and I would sit in those chairs in those meetings, and I would outthink myself out of that seat every goddamn time because I knew a better way, a quicker way, an easier way, a faster way, a softer way. And it wasn't until I ended up in the basement of my 13th inpatient treatment center next to a 19-year-old kid as he tried to rummage through a donations box to find me some used underwear that I had this epiphany, this grand realization that what I do know is that I have no idea. And my very best thinking places me here. So I like to say the only reason why I got to where I'm at today is because I had to dumb my way into this position. Coming back to how I started, this thing works when I don't work it. The moment I got this, I know I don't need you. I'm headed in a drink. I've seen me do it. I can't even fool myself. I wish that I could some days.
So Brandon, one of the things, man, I notice a lot, whether it be on social media, just, in general, I can see it on you, man, is that, you work on the mind, but you work on your body and, the physical aspect and the training and, at 5 days a week, getting into it. How important is that in everything that you're doing to keep yourself on a good path?
Dude, repetition, routine, it's everything for me. Because I learned, right? And I tell people often, because I help people get help on a daily basis, and they call me, they say, I need this help. And this is what I've come up with. This is the plan that I have. And right there, I immediately laugh. I love to hear an alcoholic's plan, right? Because I've always had a lot of plans and I know how they played out. But it's literally impossible. It defies logic to think that we can use the same brain that thought us into walking into treatment center number 13 to think me out of that problem or position I created for myself. It is impossible. I know it to be true. I've seen me experience it for 22 years, 13 treatment centers, lost count of I know. So what I've learned, again, through my experience, my narrative, I'm married to it, it worked for me, is it works when I don't work it. I was broken so bad that I was willing to follow the suggestions of mentors that seemed to know what the fuck they were talking about because they were there every time I asked for help. And they suggested what I did. And I did what they suggested. And I brought the body. I continued to bring the body. And one day the mind followed, right? So like once I got sober and stayed sober long enough, then the scales of justice equaled out. Now I have this really amazing life because I've stayed sober long enough to experience a really amazing life, blessed by the God of my understanding, given to me in this beautiful package, that now the most amazing thing ever happened. I've now had this life that is so beautiful, so amazing, so desirable that I find it way more attractive than the appeal of a drink or a drug would have to me. Right. So now, right, the abnormal had become the normal when I was drinking and drugging. But now the abnormal is the abnormal. To get off this Zoom with you and to go have a glass of wine is absolutely insane to me. I have plenty of money. I have plenty of resources. I live in Philadelphia. Kensington's right down the street. I have a car. I have a license. I have a bank account. I have money in it. I could easily go score as much heroin as I want right now. And I shot heroin for 22 years. But I did the internal work that was required, right? The body did the work on the body that then caught up to the mind, and the mind followed to now, like, to think of going to get into my brand new truck. I just got my first ever driver's license at 42 years old. I'm 43. The disconnection from reality was serious. And this isn't about money, property, or prestige. I'm just saying the blessings that took place because I bought into the concept of sobriety. But I could go get into my Range Rover and drive right down to Kensington and buy as much heroin as I want. But I've been sober long enough, and I did the work that's entailed to where that's not even a thought in my, like, that's insane to me. And if you stay sober long enough to experience that, you'll be like, I get it.
Well, and that makes me think of one of the things you said, man. And again, in your multitude of interviews, you said sobriety has given me everything that alcohol and drugs ever promised me. To someone that needs to hear that now, why? I mean, seriously, how does that get through to people that what a waste of time it is to just be messed up all the time and not headed in any direction?
It doesn't really, right? Like it didn't for, like, people could tell me that, and I'm like, that sounds great, but that's it. It sounds right, because what I know to be true, and I'm sure you guys can relate to, is the demographic that we deal with, meaning ourselves. I'm speaking about me, but I know it's to the masses because we're all kind of alike. We're defiant by nature. We hate authority, and we're never going to conform, generally because we possess this job that consists of knowing everything. So when you suggest what I should do to save my life, I suggest kindly why you should fuck off, because I know, right? So with that being said, understanding, right, the reason why I lost so bad for so many years is because I always underestimated the opponent that I was up against. Right? Because I didn't have that open mind or open heart. I knew. So no wonder I stepped in the ring with my addiction and I got beat the fuck every given time. It's so, but I missed it. It was so easy for me to see right in front of my face, but I missed it every time. Now, knowing what I know and the opponent that I'm up against and the demographic that we work with, the only approach that I found to be the most successful approach is to deliver my message through my social media platforms, my podcasts, my Zooms, my books, is through attraction rather than promotion, right? So I always say, what I try to do is I deliver my message in a form that you find so desirable, so appealing, and so attractive that you want to fuck it. If I can get you to want what I have so bad, guess what? The terms of your contract will forever change, and you too can be like decades sober and billboards for treatment, whatever you want to do, however that life looks for you, but it has to become our idea. So it's really just like a sleight of hand, smoke and mirrors card trick.
Wow.
I get off on this, so I talk really quick because I get really into what I'm saying. So I hope I'm not like.
Now, Brandon, I mean, this is awesome, man. Everything you're sharing to the people that listen and tune in and have watched this already. I mean, this is only episode 2, but there's a lot of folks, I'm sure, that will tip into this one, and what you're sharing, man, is very, very impactful. Extremely impactful.
I'm not coming on here to tell you what to do. Yeah. I'm simply saying that, like, if you like the way that I live my life and you happen to follow me in any form or fashion, guess what? What I have, you too can have, right? There's nothing special. There's nothing unique. There's nothing that sets me apart from anybody else. I walked into my 13th inpatient treatment center at 38 years old, literally prostituting my body. I owned everything that I owned fit into a bag that doubles my pillow. And I was just in such enough pain that I was willing to do anything you guys suggested. And I bought in, and my life got really good, really quick. And mine happened through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Yeah. Well, it's like, they say, the old, evidence defeats doubt, right? And like you said, no one wants to be told what to do, yet people want to obviously, model a certain behavior. And when you're modeling the right behavior and you're doing the things every single day that like you said, sometimes, you get that feeling inside you don't want to do it, but you know what, when you push through it and you get it done in the end, right, it all works out. So I think it's important, like you out there, and I see you on the social media channels, I've seen you multiple times in person around a group of people, and people are very dialed in, paying attention to what you've done, where you're at today and where you're going. And like you said, it's the process, and you're making impact. I mean, you've made impact significantly on many people that I'm around now. And so it's a beautiful thing to see, man, for sure.
Well, I think it's that motto, if you spot it, you got it, right? And as soon as I was introduced to you, I was told about what you guys are doing in the community, and I kind of left it at that. And it was still on my radar, but not so much because I'm in Philly. And then, through John Shinholzer and Courtney Sowers, and we kind of reconnected. And what you guys are doing is exactly what I'm about. And I'm a pretty tough judge of character because I'm just really set in my ways, and which is probably why I'm a 43-year-old single man that lives with 3 cats. But like, I'm the kind of guy, if it doesn't make sense to me, it's wrong, which is terrible with relationships. But what you guys do is right to me. And what you guys do makes sense to me. And that's why, like, when I had the opportunity to get to know and understand your foundation, your cause, the why of Hoffa, I'm all about it. Because you said it, the opposite of addiction is connection. And how do we change the world? How do we change the world? I don't know how to change the world, but what I know to be true, because I've seen it work, is if one helps another, that's two. 2 turn into 4, 4 turn into 8, 8 turn into 16. And before you know it, the world's starting to change. So that's why I'm super, super excited and really optimistic about joining hands in the future to do bigger, broader, fucking bolder events.
100%, Brandon. I was wondering, in the business world, it's interesting. To your point, 1 + 1 gets us to 2, and then from there, replication, kicks into gear, and we can create, momentum all across the board. In the business community, you interact with different business leaders in different industries all the time. And one thing that I've recognized, because I was there myself, I was that person, shame on me, at some point in time, that would really hold back on the feelings around mental health and addiction in the workplace, because, it would be one of those things where, hey, if I bring this up and start talking about it, it may just hinder my opportunity to advance or to get promoted, right? Which is all bullshit. It's all a big lie, right? And so, what I've been challenging business leaders to do, presidents, C-level, that they too may be touched by this, just that you never know, right? But it's there, it doesn't discriminate, right? To really get behind your people, right? And bring us to the forefront. What are your thoughts on it? To a business leader right now listening to this or watching this, what do you say to him or her around what they should be doing to help their people in the workforce?
Well, I've been brought in to speak at some pretty big, organizations, some, places I never thought that I'd find myself speaking to board members that, I really didn't understand my role in it. But what I've learned is that everyone has a thing. And if someone hasn't been affected personally by addiction, alcoholism, mental health, then that's not their thing, and that holds no place in this narrative. But everyone has a thing, whether that thing is gambling, sex, shopping, porn, whatever. Everyone has a vice. And if you just take out the word drugs, alcohol, mental health, porn, and just kind of address, right? Like, you have to uncover the problem in order to discover the problem. If there's any hopes to recover from the problem, knowing that we all have an issue, then we can just come in there and kind of talk about turning our adversities into our advantages, right? Turning our pain into our purpose, learning that if we changed our perception, we can change our world, that isolation all stems from the disconnection of the reality of the situation. And if we come in there and we together work on this for the greater good, the bigger picture of whatever the narrative is that we're speaking of, everyone wins. Everyone wins, right? Like my 2022 I don't do the whole new year, new me resolution thing. But what I decided is, and I'll just be completely transparent. Fuck it. I said that I got back into therapy big time, like super into therapy. And I said, I want to um, be better with relationships. You know, I joke there's a reason why I'm a single guy with 3 cats. Well, it's because I have problems with relationships, and that stems from childhood issues with my father, who I live with, where I suffered some traumatic experiences and refused to be vulnerable or allow anyone to ever see me for really me. I can do it with the masses of strangers, but God forbid we're like in a one-on-one intimate relationship, whatever, not even sexual, just mean like personal, employer to employee. So what I've come up with is if anyone's in my life, they're there for a reason, and whatever that reason is important, because I'm busy and I don't have time to just hang out with whoever. So I figured if I go back to therapy and really give it my all, in hopes to better my relationships with anyone in my life, friend, professional, sexual, whatever, then that outcome is going to be better for each individual involved, which means our lives will get better. You know what I mean? So I had to like really hone in on some things I didn't want to look at about my life that I know is a pattern. And is it comfortable? No. But is it yielding better results? I believe so. I know it will. I'm still in the mix of the work. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think so along the same lines, because this is something big I had to learn in my life, was the victim mentality. And I think a sponsor said this to you before, that drinking and drugging is not your problem, it's your thinking, attitude, and behavior. And it's not so much about drugs that relates to it. That's all aspects of life. Like everything revolves around your thinking, your attitude, and your behavior that dictates the outcome of your life, wouldn't you say?
That's it. That's completely it, right? Because what happens is I wake up, I walk around, and I place expectations on you, on him, on her, them, and expectations. Once you buy into the program of sobriety and do the work, the 12 steps, we learn that expectations are nothing but unfulfilled resentments. And what are resentments? Our number one offender that will lead us to another drink. And what is to drink? To drink is to die. For my case, not die, live, wake up every day and drink against my will, which is, its own hell. So what I've learned is that the sooner that I know all that I can control in this world is my thinking, my attitude, and my behavior, and I accept you, him, them, exactly where they're at, my world's so much easier and lighter to navigate through. Like because you're going to let me down. It's not a matter of if, but when. It's coming. It's impossible for you not to.
Yeah. It's one of those things, like, you control the controllables. And when you boil it down, it's the two things, right? We touched on one already. It's the mindset and the attitude. One thing we can control, and obviously our effort, right? What we put into it every single day. And there's so many things around us in this world right now today that are out of our control that can put people right back in a very deep, dark place if they don't have the ability, right, to really be strong around those controllables. So
I want to read this. I posted this today, and this is a book that I read out every morning. March 14th. Archie doesn't know how to worry without getting upset. Eddie Bunker. If you're of age, you remember that. Most of us are like Edith's television husband, Archie. When we worry, we get upset. Problems seem too big for us. We get afraid. We feel powerless. What does the program tell us to do when we feel powerless and our life is upset? ? We look at the problem honestly. Then we ask our higher power to help us with the problem. We take it one day at a time. We believe our higher power will take care of us and help us. We will have problems. That's life. But we can get through them with care and support. We don't have to get crazy. We don't have to make things worse. We can be kind to ourselves and live through problems just fine with our higher power's help. Prayer for the day. Higher power, help me do what I can today about my problems. Help me stop worrying. Action for the day. If I have a problem today, I'll do what I can and leave the outcome to my higher power. Right? So there's just a point in life where acceptance is the answer to everything. I woke up today, my gym, my trainer, she said, I have to cancel 9:30. Can we do 1:30? My first thought was I was livid because I have a whole day scheduled around that. And that now throws everything else off. And I said, what am I doing? Now I know, I read that. Ignorance is no longer bliss. I read it this morning, right before she texted me. And now I know that, like, I have to accept that. And I can stay caught in the mess, and it's just gonna aggravate me, and then it's gonna snowball effect into me cussing you out because I gotta do this at 4. You know what I mean? Like, I'll create these insane narratives if I don't know the information that can change the outcome.
Well,
But now I know.
isn't that proof that the higher power has a sense of humor too? You're going to post something like that, and it's like, okay, we're going to test about how serious you are about this, right?
Yeah. Make sure you guys know I walk on water and I'm never affected. I am fucking it. And then it's like, ah.
Oh man.
Man.
Yeah, it's interesting. The someone that I worked with several years ago was talking about the space between stimulus and response, right? And I don't know the exact quote, but they say that space between stimulus and response, that's where our growth and our freedom lies. And you think about it, in many cases, we all have those knee-jerk reactions. Something happens and we want to, take action right away, good, bad, or indifferent. It's like if you have the ability to really stretch that space out and do some thinking inside of it, and then making it the decision, right? It can be very, very helpful for all. And that's just something that me personally, I've really taken on, full stride lately. I mean, 437 days in right now, and I'm loving life, man. Feeling freaking amazing.
That's a big deal, dude. That's a very, very big deal.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, so the reality is now that I know that all I can do is control my thinking, my attitude, my behavior, and then I have great mentors in my life like Steve O. One day he told me, I was somewhere with him, and he was really mad at his assistant / business, whatever the person's relationship is. And I was like, well, what do you do? And he's like, well, the first thing that I do is I have a 24-hour rule. If I'm having a problem with the situation or the outcome of said situation, I table it for 24 hours. And I'm, like you said, create that space. And these are things that I see my mentors do that have that peace and that solace that I'm in search of.
Absolutely.
Well, and Brandon, speaking of Steve-O, I listened to the interview or I guess his podcast where you two were talking to each other. And one of the facts that he brought up was that so many people that help people in recovery tend to be the ones that relapse the most. So what are you doing on your end, man, to make sure that you're not one of those statistics? I know you said the basics, but is there anything else that makes sure you're steering straight?
Right. I have this heightened sense of awareness. And before I got into my line of work, I went to my sponsor, and my sponsor is a sober man. And he also is a therapist, a private practice. And I said, Lex, what do you think of this decision that I might make? And he said, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't share with you, most people, more so than not, get into the work that at the time he did, that I do. And unfortunately, they relapse. Because there's a line between your work and your recovery or sobriety. And the moment that line gets blurred and you start believing that your work is your recovery, you're bound to relapse. You're headed in the direction of a drink. But as long as you know that line is very bold, it's very fucking like you don't step over it and it exists, and you keep work and sobriety, you'll do great. And after he told me that, I know, right? Ignorance is no longer bliss. I'm to be held accountable. And I make it to meetings to find out what happens to people that don't make it to meetings, right? Like I stay entrenched in my sobriety because I know, again, I have alcoholism, not alcoholism, and I can't stay sober on yesterday's sobriety. And I hate, sometimes I sound like maybe a fucking broken record, but these are truly mottos that I live by. Like these things have created the foundation and laid this roadmap out for me that is just beyond anything a human could do. So, I'll go to a meeting tonight. I have sponsees. I talk to my sponsor, but the beautiful thing is I don't even have to talk to my sponsor that much. Thank God. Like I have a great network of sober guys. I call my sponsor when my back's against the wall and I have some serious, serious stuff that I need figured out. And maybe that I can't share with a lot of people because it's personal. But, I'm the whole triangle: trust God, clean house, help others. Those three are connected big time, and when you have those connected, man, you're pretty much drink proof.
Brandy, that big bold line you're referring to around sobriety and work, because this is something that I'm personally experiencing now, and I think I know others are too. Friends of mine going on this journey, is that when you cut these things out of your life altogether, and you get on this path, things that you do out there, whether it's going to could be going to a birthday party, could be going to an anniversary, any type of event, right? There's always something there. It seems like there's alcohol, there could be drugs, right? And especially with the alcohol side of it, it's almost like if you're not having a cocktail, sometimes you feel like you are the abnormal one, right? So you want to try to distance yourself and kind of pick and choose where you want to go, and especially who you want to be with. But you occupy your time, right? My mother used to say, she was busy. Now she says she's occupied with a purpose, with the foundation, which I love. But every day I find myself just occupied with a purpose, but it's like a lot of work to help other people nonstop, but it keeps me on a good path. But you saying, hey, make sure that you've got that big, bold, dark line in between doing the work and doing the work for yourself. Sobriety is very key. And, I think that's just, I guess I'm reemphasizing your message and sharing that, because that is one thing that I personally have seen and currently and still experience right now, and need to make sure that we always got that dark line in the sand.
Yeah, like I'm completely entrenched in the drug and alcohol world in all aspects. And I don't know, it's not like I say, okay, me answering this phone, helping this guy in the treatment, although this is my job and I work for Banyan Treatment Center, this is my job and it's not my sobriety. I don't really try to define it. Like I don't say, okay, I put in 2 hours here of work and now I really just have a routine and a schedule, and I know, and I stay very proactive with my sobriety, right? I go to meetings, I check in, I do the work that's entailed to continue to live on my journey. I think for me, if I stop going to meetings, if I stop checking in with the guys that I got sober with, and just kind of started really, exiling myself from the sober community, it wouldn't take too long before I believed that lie. But I also, at the end, man, I drank and drugged for so long that even when I was doing it at the end, I lost the desire. Like the appeal was gone. I was doing it because I had to, and I just didn't have another way out. And I had some money at the end. Like the allure or that lie that always talked to me before of, oh, one more would be so great. When I was sticking that last one in my arm, I was like, God, please. I just don't even it was just done. I was done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we got about 15 minutes left here before you got to run, Brandon. So I just want to ask this, because listening to all your interviews and trying to learn a little more about your story, I found this one thing that you said. I don't know if amusing is the right word, but like just it spoke to where your mindset was. So when you were selling your body, your lowest points, you said, I wanted to go to the treatment centers and I would sit around and say, I'm not one of those nut jobs. And I wanted to prove to my mom and sister that I wasn't one of those people. Like, again, to someone that's deep into this stuff, why is that mindset so detrimental, and why do you need to just completely stop thinking, and comparing yourself and saying that I'm not one of those people?
Because, well, everything that I know today, I didn't know then. You know what I mean? And now I always say my life is live forward and learn backwards. And for me today, it's so fucking clear and evident why. I didn't end up in one of those places because I was not those people, right? Like I didn't voluntarily check myself in because I wanted to see how the food tastes. Like I was there for a reason, and knowing what I know today, as I continue to believe that lie, that like I was different, and that if only the circumstances were a little different prior to me coming, I wouldn't have ended up here. You know, I always say when I go to speak at treatment centers, I'll ask them to raise their hand if they've been diagnosed with disease of alcoholism and or addiction, and more so, do they agree with the diagnosis? Meaning, when you walk into treatment and they say, we believe you're an addict or an alcoholic, okay, they've diagnosed you, but now do you agree with it? And 9 out of 10 of them say yes. And I say, okay, that's great. If you're one of that rare 1 in a million that do not agree, that's amazing. I'm assuming that you opened up your emails and you found a beautiful, elegantly written email that offered a 30-day bed and breakfast stay for you at the middle of some treatment center in the middle of the woods. I never got that email, but cool, you got that, enjoy it. But if you're one of those ones that agree with the diagnosis that they gave to you as an addict or an alcoholic, and they raise their hand, I say, great, now I'm about to share something with you. No need to waste your time getting mad at me because you stuck your hand up. I'm not putting words in your mouth. This is of your own validity. But if you agree with the diagnosis that you've been given as an addict or an alcoholic, such as myself, all that simply means is we've been diagnosed with a disease that, if left untreated, equals death. It's a fatal disease. That's the fact. Don't waste your or my time to talk to me about it after this talk. Look it up. Factual evidence. But here's the scary part about that, is that it's the only fatal disease that we've been diagnosed with. Remember that we've accepted the only fatal disease that we've been diagnosed with that lies to us in our own voice, making us believe the unbelievable, telling us that we do not have this disease that we've already accepted, right? So it's not like your head steps into my brain and says, oh, hey, Novak, you're not an addict. And I'm like, fuck you, stranger danger. No. It's in my voice that's telling me I don't have it. So follow me. Diagnose me with HIV. I'm rushing to the hospital to get medication. I don't want to die. Fatal disease. Diagnose me with cancer. I'm rushing to the hospital to get chemo because I don't want to die. Fatal disease. Diagnose me as an addict or an alcoholic. I need a glass of wine or a bag of heroin to figure out what the fuck's wrong with you for diagnosing me with said disease. It's just as fatal as the first 2 diseases. But left to my own devices, I'll believe that lie in my own mind, in my own voice that tells me I don't have that disease. I'll jump off this Zoom. I'll get in my truck. I'll go to TD Bank, pull out a lot of money, and go buy a whole bunch of heroin. And I can make those actions make complete sense to me. I've seen me do it. Right now, with 7 years sober, I can do that in the blink of an eye. And what actions that would allow me to make such idiotic behaviors are is simply this. Brandon only attends Brandon's Anonymous. Brandon sponsors Brandon, and Brandon is Brandon's God. And when those 3 trifectas are connected, it's not a matter of if, but when I use. So, very long answer to a short question. To wrap this up, if you don't believe that you belong in there, right? Why are you there? Is the first part of that. If you do believe that you belong in there and you agree with the diagnosis that they've been given with you, but you're different, you're not. Very simple.
Fair enough. Well, I don't know if you want to talk about it or not, but I know you have a new book, The Streets of Baltimore. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, the first book, which did insanely well, The Dream Seller, I wrote that book without a high school diploma. I had no GED. Expelled from the 11th grade as a direct result of my addiction. But I wrote that book in pen and paper, Dream Seller, and I wrote it in 12 chapters. 12 turned into 23. For my co-author, who's a very smart man. We got a literary agent. They shopped the book around, and we got an amazing deal, and I became a published author, right? And although I never graduated high school, I got my GED in prison. Today, I am paid to go speak at universities all over the nation. So I'm not bragging or boasting about that. I'm simply saying, again, I didn't get to a 12-step program with my alcoholism or addiction because I took the short bus to school. I got here because I was too smart for my own good. And I wrote that book while heavily entrenched in my addiction. Um, but the book just came out revised in its 9th edition. If you know anything about books, books seldomly make it revised after their 1st edition. This made it into its 9th edition, a really big deal in the literary world. And then I decided that we had to put the sequel to that out, which now is The Streets of Baltimore. That's the long awaited, to be exact, 8-year sequel to Dream Seller. And if you're interested in checking that out, you could go to my website, www.brandonnovak.com, and all that stuff's on there.
Sweet, sweet. And I know you got to run here, so you just gave us the website, but where can people reach you, find out more about Novak's House, and any like parent or even person that's in addiction? How can they get a hold of you and find help and all that good stuff?
If anyone is out there struggling and they're in a position that they can't get out of on their own, and they want to reach out to me, they can call me at 610-600-9174. That's for help getting into drug and alcohol treatment. If you're sober and you're in a program about to get out of and you're looking for sober living, call 302-433-6256, and that's Novak's House. Give us a call, man. We'll do what we can do to give you the help that you not more so need but deserve.
So Brandon, one more question around that, because Brandon gave me a tour of his 3 amazing homes, and they are homes. They feel like home as soon as you walk up the steps and open up the door. And I know Brandon said it's so important, because you want it to be like as if it were your home back then. And so it feels that way. In the recovery community, sober living houses, you have 3. We have 1 down here in Maryland, with plans to perhaps opening up additional homes. The communities, the neighbors, the folks that are around these houses, right? To get them to really lean in and be a part of this mission and this journey to help, right? Versus putting up the wall, perhaps in some cases. What do you say to them, if any of those are listening today?
Well, what I encourage my guys to do in my house is to be a part of the community, right? Like when the neighbors are out and they're bringing their groceries in, like they go help. When it snows, they shovel. When it rains or the leaves fall, they rake. Because the reality is the disease of addiction does not discriminate. My brother's an attorney in the White House. My mother's a nuclear physicist. My father died. I just got off the phone prior to this Zoom with trustees of an individual who I just helped, whose father is literally a billionaire. And if I said the name, you would clearly know. The disease of addiction does not discriminate. It doesn't care about your age, your race, your sexual identity, your creed, religion, lack of religion. It doesn't give a shit if you're under the bridge, shaking a cup, asking for change, or if your father's a billionaire a few times over. Like 1 out of 3 people will be affected. If you have not been affected by it, God bless. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. But the reality is, directly or indirectly, you have or will be affected. And what better people to turn to for advice than yourself or myself? There's a saying I heard once. There's this man on the side of the road, and he's stuck in this really big hole, and he can't get out of the hole. A doctor walks by the hole. He writes a script. He throws the script down to the man. A police officer walks by. He throws a citation down to the man. A judge walks by. He throws a subpoena down to the man. An alcoholic walks by, and he jumps down in the hole with the man. The man said, "What are you doing? Are you crazy? I've been stuck here for days." And the alcoholic looks to the man and said, "Don't worry. I've been here before. I know how to get out." So that's our defects become our assets, man.
100%. Well, I love you, man. I'm so glad, you came on this thing right out of the gate. And I can't wait to see you again. I know it's tough sometimes on Zoom because always in person, we got that energy and that feeling when we're sitting near each other. But that won't be too long, man. I'm sure when we get back together again. And again, appreciate everything you're doing out there. And like Brandon said, highly encourage. If you need the help out there, please reach out to him. You got his contact information, everything you need. He's the guy. So thank you, man. Appreciate it.
boys. Thank you so much for giving me the time. It's truly an honor, and I mean it. I'll do anything for you if you ever need anything. And I look forward to joint adventures in the future, like seriously.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Brandon. We appreciate your time. And to all of you out there, be sure to share this with loved ones, elected officials, get the word out there. And we're going to see you next time on The Sober Social.